Hi, my name's Ross Andrusko. At the time of the Kent State incident, I was a doctoral student in my final quarter of courses. I was also teaching full-time at a Presbyterian school in the Pittsburgh area, Geneva College, and at Youngstown State University in Ohio.
At the time I was 35 years old, and that was 47 years ago. It was almost half a century, and pretty eventful time. Certainly significant for my own life, but I think in the culture there were some real turning points there.
The fact of the matter is that they thought that the war in Vietnam was an important incursion. They felt that we were justified in being there, and a lot of students didn't feel that way, and so it was a major contentious issue, probably the most significant one in my 70-some years of life. And the fact of the matter is many students, most students probably didn't really approve of the Vietnamese conflict.
So that night the Hells Angels came into town during the week, just prior to the weekend, and things got out of hand. And so beer bottles were thrown through store windows, and the whole thing came in. The police came up, the the highway patrol came in, and they had locked us in that building, but we were out by that time, and they came in and tried to quiet everything down.
And it became such a significant issue that there were always on the edges of intelligent discussion minor groups that were not always well-mannered. And one of those groups was on most campuses, but was also important at Kent State, and that was Students for Democratic Society, SDS they were called. And they led a lot of very radical and noisy campaigns against the war. That was the real issue, the war.
Somebody came in and started breaking the windows in the ROT shack and set it on fire. And as crazy as we were at that time, and I say that in quotes, 22 caliber shells started going off. But everybody thought it was kind of funny. But it wasn't.
That set the tone for that era. And so when you had the fire there and the National Guard was called in by the president of the university at Kent State, as suggested by the governor, then you had a really contentious issue, because those kids, those students, they may have been wrong, but the fact of the matter is they felt they had a right to a point of view.
And you would think that when they called in the fire department, they'd send one of their big rigs. They didn't. They sent in a very antiquated, old pump there with a little hose about that big around. They didn't want it to be put out. Somebody rang the bell. So the students were flooding in, and that's what got me to go over there. And here's the National Guard. And so I'm standing there watching this occur. And I must have been, maybe a football field away from where the bell was. And the National Guard were circled around it behind them.
Most of the students that were around there were simply spectators. The fact of the matter is, if you got a bunch of soldiers camped out on the top of a hill in one of your campus buildings, you wonder what the heck's going on, because everybody else is just still going to classes. And this incident kind of happened at a moment when people were passing from one part of campus to another part of the campus on the way to their classes.
As I'm standing, I remember I was in the military for 2 years. So I've been taught to instinctively, when anybody pulls a gun up like this at you, there's only two responses. You just shoot them back or hit the deck if they were any distance away so you didn't get shot. Well, I wasn't in the Army. I wasn't shooting back. So when I saw that, I hit the deck because I thought, this does not look good. And as I lay there on the ground, there's a smell that you hear that mixes the smell of gunpowder with blood. And it's a very, I call it an acrid smell, and I could smell it. When I looked up, next to me was a former student who had been in my class with blood running out of his head. He'd been shot in the head. And other students were shot. He was dead. And I remember I thought, this is crazy. This is insane, what's going on. And you put all that together, what was happening around and all of that, it did not make any sense.
And the students were left, I think, holding the bag. They were blamed for what had happened. They didn't shoot any guns. They didn't intrude on somebody else's territory. This was their campus. This was their school.
There was bullet holes in our apartment walls. And at night during when that was happening, there were helicopters going. Have you ever seen one of those wars when a war movie go plop, 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 plop? Well, that's what it sounded like. Plop, 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 plop. And there were tanks. So what you have to imagine is a war zone. There were tanks on the campus grinding away. And there were random gunfire during the night.
Even though they could say later that they felt at risk, there was nobody anywhere near them. The people that they claimed were throwing stones at them were 50, 60 feet away. It was a distance I couldn't have hit them if I wanted to. But they did turn at one point, one brief point in history, and shot into the general population. People were hit at odd distances. There was nobody real close to them hit, but there were people hundreds of feet away down in parking lots.
And I do not know who gave the command to fire, but I do know how it felt to live through those events. And it has a profound change on you. It really does. And it's taken a long time to heal.
The reality is that nobody, was ever prosecuted at the level of the military. There were students that died, there were students that left the university, there were pressure applied on academic fields. Certainly in my area, which was organizational behavior communication, there was lots of pressure applied on the people that assisted in this. Again, if you heard me right, the university sponsored study of the event, which then was rejected when it was found that at least the people that did that research and the people they interviewed, which was a large sampling of the campus community, the people that worked there, the people who went to school there, people who lived in the community, were critical of the way the university performed its role.
There's nothing to say but how sad.